It is the public pressure, such as these jabronis will flash up on the screen right now. The college students staging a die-in outside the governor's office with t-shirts splattered with fake blood that say, "I don't want to be a target," and so on. Like,
we are the Armed Attorneys. Today we're talking about an important bill that is landed on the desk of a governor. And will it eliminate gun-free zones in the state? This is, I would say, big development and a model for other states. We're going to be going through all this and see who's affected. But before we begin, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting that like button. And today we are talking about the state of Wyoming, which has done incredible work with the elimination of gun-free zones, an issue that is near and dear to my heart.
yeah, can we just say a quick prayer that Wyoming never goes the way of California?
Yeah.
Because they're really trying to muck it all up.
Yeah, they really
right?
are.
They screwed up, right? They screwed up, Oregon. They screwed up Utah.
Washington.
Screwed up Idaho. Well, they're trying to screw up Idaho. Screwed up Colorado. Just leave Wyoming be. Leave Wyoming, the Dakotas. Leave them alone, because this is awesome. And we will say, this has passed both the House and Senate in Wyoming. So this is real on the precipice, not just, pie in the sky dream. We're just waiting on the governor to sign it. And he has till tomorrow, y'all. If you're watching this on Wednesday, he has till tomorrow to make his decision. So what's going on? It's HB 172, and it is pretty crisp as far as bills go. What do you think? You're the expert.
Yeah, no, I think it's well drafted.
Yeah.
I got nitpicks about everything.
Right, sure enough. But it is fantastic, because what we're doing is we're saying, hey, if you have a license, a concealed carry license in Wyoming, or one that is recognized by the state of Wyoming with some provisions, like if you're 21. So if you were an 18-year-old Texan with a license, you couldn't take advantage of this.
Right.
But you get to carry into some gun-free zones that have always been prohibited up until now. There's a little list here, and most of them actually are places you could already carry in Texas, so they're good common sense, right?
Yeah. And, the way their law operates, they have these general prohibitions, and the way the law is designed is hey, it's actually okay if you have a license and it's one of these locations, and they go back and they re-outline all these things. So
right.
there's no ambiguity.
No, exactly. So it's, all right, meetings of the government entities and meetings of the legislature, airports outside the secured area. Again, these are all common sense, so things that are legal in lots and lots of states. Most public buildings, they're still cutting you off from jails, courthouses, things like that, which, jails, I guess I get it. Courthouses, I don't. My most dangerous walks are to and from the courthouse. And honestly, when I'm in the courthouse too, how many fights do you see when you're in there?
More than there should be for a secured building.
Yeah, I guess more than you'd hope, but less than you'd think for a criminal courthouse.
Guns would just make it worse, Emily.
Sure enough. But most importantly and most critically, schools, elementary schools, secondary schools, colleges and universities, and the corresponding school athletic events, so long as there's no alcohol served at said event.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And there's one more exception to the school. So you can't be an elementary school student.
Yeah, no, you can't be a student of the elementary or secondary school and carry inside. Like,
sure.
All right.
Yeah, all right,
sure enough.
We get it. The fifth grader probably not considered the people for purposes of the Second Amendment.
Yeah, but it's wonderful. It's wonderful. Now, controversial part for some people, what happens to private property under this bill?
Well, when it comes to private property rights, and I'll say, I've seen this discussion happening in our comments section, and it's tough because we have kind of the conflict of two different rights. Private property owners, guess what? I get to decide who comes on and isn't allowed on my property. Well, also, this is kind of running in conflict with the Second Amendment. Hey, I have a right to keep myself safe, defend myself, have the best tool to keep myself alive. And where do these two things kind of impact each other? Well, Wyoming has said private property owners, their rights trump folks who want to carry, so they can still exclude folks.
Right, and I know that, and I've seen the comment section too. I know it makes people mad that private property owners can still exclude firearms, but here's the deal, y'all. That's the way it's got to be. Because if that's not the way it is, then the government is in the business of telling you what you're allowed to do on your property. And absolutely not. It's all good when the government's saying, hey, private property owners, you got to let gun carriers in all day long. That's great. But when the next government comes in and says, hey, private property owners, these are the words you can use on your own property. This is when you have to let the police into your own property. Like, this is when your rights start eroding, which is exactly what the government does once they get their foot in the door. Mm-mm.
Yeah, this kind of compelled participation or speech or,
Mm-hmm.
think about who's allowed on the property.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can't think of another way around it. I'd be interested. I mean, if y'all have an idea where,
Sure.
hey, guess what? Private property owners' rights are preserved, but also we don't interfere with the right to people to carry. I'd love to see what that solution looks
Oh,
like. I'm
yeah.
just not that creative. As far as I can tell, this is kind of the most practical and administrative way to accomplish it.
Well, I would have to agree. So, this really affects government bodies and it affects government bodies in this very specific way, but it's great, especially hardening schools. My goodness. Now, this is where it also does a really good job and where, like, you and I have something to do for the 2027 legislative session here in Texas because it's too late now
Yeah.
for 25. But instead of just creating some sort of obscure remedy that may or may not be enforced if the government breaks the law here, it actually allows the government actor who prohibited you from walking in with a firearm to be charged with a crime.
Yeah, we love that. So
Yeah, you know what's going to stop bad behavior?
get
Government
charged with
actors
a
getting arrested.
Well, and that's part of, and you have to think about, there's multiple steps to these laws. All right,
Mm-hmm.
you got a law, you got the spirit of the law. Maybe there's some social cohesion and everybody does what the law intended. All right, well, what happens when they misapply the law or they choose to not enforce the law? Does that law have a penalty or an enforcement mechanism? If the answer is no, then that law isn't a law.
Correct.
Now, let's talk about another provision of this, which is statutory preemption. And so, when we talk about statutory preemption, what does that mean? Well, that's the state taking the authority away from municipalities, think cities or counties, and saying we're going to do things uniformly on the state level. And if you pass a law in an area where we've decided to occupy that they call it occupying the field, then your law is not going to be valid. We're not going to recognize it. It's going to get overturned. It's void. So we have a statutory preemption provision here as well.
Yeah, and so this is where, if you know the answer, because I did not have time to dig into this, what is happening in Wyoming that caused this? Because it's very interesting, because it appears that Wyoming already had statutory preemption, which is great, but what this bill does is insert, in addition to can't be regulated by municipalities, such and such, it inserts the words state agency, and it calls especially out to, hey, this is preempted by the state legislature. So is there some doings a transpiring in Wyoming where, like, top police agency was trying to do some restrictions? I don't know the answer,
Yeah,
but if you know, please let me know.
well, I mean, it makes me think of like the United States Congress and then the Federal Register,
Mm-hmm.
or the
The
Federal
ATF,
yeah, the
yeah.
Federal Code of Regulation. I mean, that's what it makes me think of. I think of Texas's equivalent of the Federal Register, or not the Federal Register, but the Code of Federal Regulation. And ours is pretty pointless, I'll say, for the most part. I mean, it outlines a few things, but it's really inconsequential to everybody's lives.
But think about, like, the ways in which the DPS puts out guidance that actually restricts people's gun rights. And it's like, that's a state agency.
Yeah, I guess
That's
so.
a state agency.
Like when somebody, this is stuck in my craw right now. It's
So
like when you're
fun.
eligible for a license to carry
Mm-hmm.
and you have like an arrest that wouldn't disqualify you and you forget to include it on there and the DPS denies
And
you.
they did preach, brother.
I hate that
That
stuff.
is the kind of bullshit that this sort of thing. I mean, this is good. It's either creative lawmaking in anticipation of problems, or they are solving a known problem and doing it simply, easily, and very well. But that's only half the story.
Yeah, so the next part of this equation is the governor, Mark Gordon. And so, like we said, this is passed out of both chambers
Mm-hmm.
on his desk. Deadline is tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Needs to hear from y'all. I mean, if there's a call to action on this, it's
If you live in Wyoming.
live in Wyoming, contact the governor's office because he has vetoed something similar to this.
Yes. So he was elected in 2019. Last year in 2024, he vetoed a substantially similar law. Why, you might ask yourself? Well, I'm guessing it is the public pressure, such as these jabronis will flash up on the screen right now. The college students staging a die-in outside the governor's office with t-shirts splattered with fake blood that say, I don't want to be a target, and so on. Like, you are safer. When license holders carry into your university or your school, you are safer.
Yeah, well, and I mean, at least the die-in indoors, it's much more. I mean, the environment is great. It's just like protest season, it has to get a little bit warmer outside, and then everybody's outraged.
I know.
Then it's okay to be outraged outside.
Right, I know.
So the weather's not that good in Wyoming. I imagine.
This is just the children are not our future anymore. I mean, I have no faith. I have no faith in college kids at this point.
Emily sitting in the lawn chair on the lawn screaming at children.
For real.
So, all right. You need to reach out to the governor's office if you're a resident of the state of Wyoming. This is one of those things. I mean, we have good research on this. John Lott, Crime Research Prevention Center, more guns equals less crime.
Yeah.
People, what stops these mass events? Well, it's when they're confronted with force.
Armed resistance.
Yep. And our license holders, who this bill is really targeted at.
Yes.
I mean, these are the most law-abiding people in the state. Why should they lose their right to keep and bear arms?
That is exactly right. So, at least, and I'm not on the inside track in Wyoming. Wish I was. I'm not. I cannot find anything on the internet signaling which way the governor will go on this one. So it would just be, if I were a citizen of Wyoming and he vetoed this for the second year in a row after the legislature, obviously the people have an appetite for it, or the legislature's not doing it 2 years in a row, I would be outraged.
Yeah, I am outraged.
So anyway.
But we hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you did, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and help us fight the anti-2A algorithm by sharing this video.
And as always, please leave us comments below. I have questions I need answered. Until next time, where the arms turns.